what I'm curious to understand is, what are some of the brands that are doing it really well? And there could be agencies too. And then taking it perhaps a little bit one step further, akin to the Google example. Why? What are they doing, and where are they focusing their energy so that in your mind it's effective? And if you give us just a couple of examples, I think that helps
Yeah.
contextualize it a bit.
Yeah, for sure. And again, I will sort of caveat this, like I'm looking at this as a reporter and as somebody
Yep.
who kind of sort of observes this from the outside. So sort of effectiveness is a little hard, but the it's what is interesting, I think I find about, what Google's actually just one of the oldest ones. So it's sort of just
Right.
it always kind of comes to mind. I think they just celebrated their 10th anniversary. So they've just been around a really long time. I think in this market, kind of any publication with staying power is just interesting in and of itself.
Mm-hmm.
So I think they're really interesting. I am, uh, I think this is an obvious example, but I think what Robinhood has done and then now what it is planning to do, I think is fascinating. So what Robinhood did, Robinhood acquired a company called Market Snacks a few years ago. Market Snacks at the time was a financial newsletter. They acquired the company, they hired the founders of that company as well, and they built out Robinhood Snacks, which is a really great sort of digestible financial newsletter. It also, at a point, had a podcast, and it's from what it seems like from the numbers that Robinhood has kind of divulged, it's very, very popular. I found it interesting. We actually covered this because we found it really interesting as a sign at the Times. Is there was a survey of institutional investors done a couple weeks ago, and they were asked what news and media brands do you read the most often? And Robinhood Snacks was number one among those.
Wow.
So
And these
again,
are
another
institutional investors too. This isn't, yeah,
totally,
yeah.
yeah. These are institutional investors, and that's sort of another sort of interesting that people are open to receiving news from places. And I think I do think one thing there that I think is interesting, I think it does a disservice to sort of audiences to assume that they don't understand or know that this is content presented by a brand and this is not, the same as the New York Times. I do
Mm-hmm.
not think that audiences are by any means getting dumber. I actually think audiences are getting very smart. And they know when something is presented by a brand that they append the obvious kind of asterisks in their head, just the way anybody would, to say, okay, Robinhood made this. We know that they have a vested interest in getting my business. Could that still mean that they have something interesting for me to say
Mm-hmm.
versus somebody else made this and they have a vested interest in something else that isn't the same vested interest that Robinhood has? So I think audiences know sort of the difference, and the institutional investor sort of example is a good one in that clearly they're looking at least at snacks as a viable source of information.
Sure.
And I think what Robinhood's planning on doing now is sort of spinning out Snacks into sort of a different subsidiary that they're launching called Sherwood Media.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to also launch more newsletters around different verticals, is sort of the plan right now, as far as sort of we can tell. So I think they're really interesting in terms of what they're doing. I remain absolutely fascinated by Salesforce Plus, even though I'm not sure kind of what is going on there, or if it's kind of
Mm.
effective, because I don't have sort of the inside news there. But I do think the idea of creating, a streaming service for business content is a fascinating one. Salesforce Studios, has the resources to make sort of videos and TV shows and so on, kind of dedicated to this. And Salesforce Plus remains kind of a super interesting one that we're watching. And they take a lot of their events and they put them on there as kind of
Mm-hmm.
these well produced, beautiful looking shows and so on. So they're all really interesting. I think as kind of just places that we've been keeping an eye on, at least.